Text. Melbourne Fringe respectfully acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we live, work, play, and hold our festival. We acknowledge that the oldest living culture in the world has been kept alive by a rich and continuing history of storytelling, music, dance, art, and language. We pay our respects to the people of the Kulin Nations and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island elders, past and present, who maintain an enduring spiritual and cultural connection to the land. Sovereignty was never ceded. The following is a 70-minute film recorded over Zoom in gallery display. The conversation is hosted by Caroline Bowditch alongside three panellists, Ben Evans, Deanna Niepce, and Sindri Runudde. Title: Melbourne Fringe Radical Access Conversations. Who is making the most interesting and accessible work in the world?
Hi everyone, and welcome to the second conversation in the Melbourne Fringe's Radical Access Conversations. My name is Caroline Bowditch, and I have the privilege of being the Cultural Equity Consultant for Melbourne Fringe Festival at the moment. This conversation will be focusing on who is making the most interesting and accessible work in the world. We know there are lots of people, and I have hand-selected some artists to come and talk about their work today that I think is particularly fascinating, as well as an international program that I think we'll all benefit in knowing exists. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which I am coming to you from, the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nations, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. It is an honour to continue sharing and exchanging stories on these lands where that has happened for over 65,000 years. So a brief introduction to Radical Access and the program that supports these conversation series. Radical Access at Melbourne Fringe imagines a radical version of best practice accessibility for the independent arts sector and moves the conversation beyond the provision of access services into cultural equity. It's a provocation for change and a call for accelerated action. It aims to significantly increase access and inclusion for deaf and disabled artists across the independent arts sector, and to have a real impact on the lives and careers of all independent artists, arts workers, and audiences. I would now love to invite our speakers for today's session to introduce themselves, and I'm first going to invite Ben Evans to introduce yourself. Please, Ben.
Oh, thanks, Caroline. Yes, my name's Ben Evans, and I'm the project director of Europe Beyond Access. I'm a tall white man in my late 40s, using he, him pronouns, and I identify as disabled. And as I say, I'm the project director of Europe Beyond Access. And linked to that role, I'm also the chair of the European Arts and Disability Cluster, and I may mention a little bit around that later on. And I also have a sort of freelance gig doing some access and disabled artists advisory to cultural councils and cultural ministries. And that's me. And just to say, today I'm based in the UK, and I know that some terminology around disability is different from in the UK than it is in Australia. But I'll use the terminology that I work with here in the UK, and I hope you understand the reasons for that.
Thanks, Ben. Deanna, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Deanna Niepce. I'm based in Lisbon. I'm a dancer, choreographer, author, researcher, and curator of formations and cycles. I'm a white woman seated in a wheelchair with now a dark red hair, and dark eyes and a green dress. And my sign name is, and I use she, her pronouns. And
Thanks, Diana. And Sindri.
Hey, this is me. I'm Sindri, and this is my dog Madonna. And I kind of symbolically wanted to hold her because I also do feel a little bit of a digital nervosity right now. I'm sitting in Sweden, in Stockholm, where I'm based, but I work in many parts of Europe mostly. So internationally, I work as a dancer and choreographer, maker. I also have a background in contemporary circus. Yeah, I love working with multidisciplinary expressions and means. Right now, I'm wearing some kind of, it looks like a cowboy hat, but I think it's a fishing hat with a little stripe or a band hanging around my neck, under my cheek. And I have a flowery shirt, and I'm at my office where there's a lake behind me, and it's quite warm in Sweden. I'm in my soon early 40s, and I have a white body. I identify myself as queer and disabled / visually impaired, legally blind. Yeah.
Thanks, Sindri. That's brilliant. I'm going to invite Diana and Sindri to tell us a bit more about your artistic practice. And I would love you to talk about why you've chosen to put your bodies on stage. Why do you make performance? Why is it important? And what do you want audiences that come to experience your work leave feeling or thinking? Diana, can you tell us more about your artistic practice and tell us why do you make work? Why do you put performance on, and what do you want to leave your audiences with?
This is a really hard question for me. I feel I exist in a kind of existential crisis all the time. So it's also performance is the way I can connect or relate or coexist in this world that I consider that is really sick at the moment and a really violent place to exist. So I think is the only way that I consider that I can exist in this world. So I'm very interested through my work to understand the body and mind limits and to understand how we coexist each other and how humans make decisions and how we observe systems of oppression and social questions and how we react to them. So I'm very interested in this. So all my work is kind of connected in terms of philosophy, but very much about this social interaction. So I try to work always in a way, in a very collaborative way, that we are kind of testing, negotiating, and all the time kind of trying to understand a cause and effect reaction through movement and through actions and through choreographic practices. So like Sindri, I also came from circus, so my techniques are very based and draw through physic interactions in terms of also the components of physics works through bodies or also how we react to external agencies. I'm very interested to work also in movement, in terms of movement about sets or scenographies that they give you agency and also how the world and external interactions will give you agency to the body. So my process are always a kind of a game that we precise rules, we set rules, and that they define roles that are constantly shifting, roles of power and submission, and how the performance coexist each other into dominating subjects or dominated subjects. So I'm very interested in how, as a performer, we make choices and how we provoke the world to understand that things are always a perspective that can be very complex about the existence in the world. So I work about what bothers me, and I think about shows or performances as an experience to the spectator. And it can be more intense according to their own experience or identity or where they exist in the world. So this is always different. But I'm not really interested in about entertaining. So I'm more about kind of experiencing something that can go deep, and it can be kind of also tough to experience.
Yeah.
So I'm also interested in understanding what is social accepted, and to talk about things that very often we silence in society. And basically, this is a very short resume about how I do my practice.
Amazing. Thanks, Deanna. That's really so much in that we could take apart. So we'll come back to some of that. Thank you so much. Sindri, same questions to you. Why do you make performance? Why do you put your body on stage? And what's your relationship with your audience? What do you want to leave them feeling or thinking?
Okay, so firstly, I could totally +1 on many of the previous things that was being said. Yeah, I think, or I was actually performing last Saturday in a cabaret, so it was supposed to be a bit cabaret, serious, not serious, humoristic, that kind of vibe. But I got to hear from so many people in the audience that like, wow, you're such an entertainer. And then I was thinking, because I got to hear it so much and I've heard it before, and I try to use the word entertainer. So I think I like to entertain. I think that's a part of my way of expressing myself and communicate. And it also made me think a little bit extra these days, like what is it if you would conceptualize or like extract what's the essence of entertainment, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's one part of my practice, to often create a dialogue with the audience or communication, and maybe with other mediums like sound and object. Sometimes I often say that I like to work with dance and humor. I like to work with humor not only in the perspective of me entertaining, as I started to talk about, but also for me to get a sonic feedback, to hear the audience laugh or to hear them talk to me or make sounds, because then as a visual impaired performer, it can be a bit or it can be very helpful to get a sonic feedback in that sense. So that's a little aspect, a little corner of my work, or maybe a big corner. I was thinking on my way here, because I was a bit like, I think I'm in a position now, or a process of like rethinking a lot of things, why I make art and how, because the last 10 years at least, I would say, I like almost 10 years ago started to make my own work from a choreographical perspective, and now I think I reach a moment where I feel like I tried many things. I made group works, I made 3 solos, I worked as a choreographer in institutions, I have received fundings and grants, and I traveled with my work, and now I feel a little bit like, okay, what's my passion now, or how do I connect to what's urgent in relation to politics and disability, for example. Yeah. So I think as I'm speaking, I often say I think speak, or I speak think. Like I think, I don't know what I'm gonna say, so it's gonna come up by saying it. And on my way here, I was listening to a podcast that I'm inspired by these days, called "Make Art, Not Content," and he was talking so much about like art, making art as a lifestyle, being an artist as a lifestyle. And I think that's beautifully to connect that to living with a disability. And I think art for me is something that supports and helps me both with my imagination and my fictive realities and my way of structuring my living through the imagination and fictiveness somehow to give me hope to move on somehow. And I think that also connected to how I grew up as a child, because one answer could also be I cannot not do it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think I always wanted to do it since I was a child, to make things, to create, to let things leave my body, even if it's an ephemeral movement. Also ceramics, painting, drawing, and now I'm writing songs in my practices. So I think there's also some kind of multiplicity or eclecticism in what art is for me.
Yeah.
That is also relating to be a disabled maker, because I started to make because I wanted to create realities where it's more functional and accessible for me, because I felt like it wasn't to some extent.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one part of it still. I do think, and I will talk about that later when I talk about the EBA project that I'm aiming to go for. Yeah, but I think I just love dancing. I love moving, and I love to think through my body. And I love, even if I'm not making movement, if I make objects or sound, it still comes from the body, from that perspective. And I think it gives so much hope that we can work with our bodies and perceptual politics in so many different ways through dance and art making.
Amazing. Thank you, Sindri. I think that concept of thinking through the body, like actually to process the world, Deanna, you were talking about this, and I feel like you both talked about how to make art is a way to process the world, to potentially change the narrative or think about the narratives differently and or shape them. So thank you so much for being so wise.
I think it's also very interesting, like working about politics in art sector and how can be different the way we do that. And this is something that also very fascinates me.
Yeah. How do we make that's different to how other artists make? Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you both. I'm now going to ask Ben to talk to us about a project that you're both connected to as commissioned artists, but to talk a bit about Europe Beyond Access and what it is, how it came to be, what it does, and what its ambitions are, what the challenges have been. I mean, we could talk about this for days, Ben, but if you would in some way give us a way to even get an insight into it in a brief way, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Sure. And I realize you've asked me to follow these reflections on pain and life and politics and joy by talking about money and organizational structures. So please forgive me right now, but I will try and summarize it, as well as I think share some of the challenges as well. So I'm really honored to be invited to talk, but I think we also have to reflect on these processes where we're learning. But Europe Beyond Access is what we call a large-scale cooperation project. Currently, we're in our second edition. The first edition ran for 5 years, from 2018 to 2023, and the current edition started in 2024 and will run through to 2027. And we are a consortium of mainstream arts organizations in 10 different countries now across Europe. And I think a few things are important to say around that. the fact that these are mainstream cultural organizations. So when this isn't a project run by specialist organizations in disability arts, we're mainstream, high-profile arts organizations who, in a way, happen to be making work with disabled artists because we believe in the quality and innovation of that work. But we also realize that we have to work together to break down some of the barriers. So we are learning together, we are exchanging together. We are an unusual mix of organizations. The lead partner is Skånes Dance Theatre in Sweden, which is an ensemble company, which does have its own building. We do have a number of dance festivals as part of the partnership, but we also have multi-art form venues and big, well-known institutions across Europe. Because of the dance element from a number of our partners, our common language is dance across the project, but we have a really open idea of what that means. And as you've already been talking about, just artists exploring the world through the body, through language, which includes visual language, all feel really important. And just to give a scale, current project is 4 million euro, and 2 million of that is funded by the organizations themselves. So this is not outreach, this is not education, this is core educational program. So we're very different organizations in some ways, but we do share some guiding principles. And one of those, clearly, is that we believe that disabled artists are contributing to richer and more innovative art sector. And I know you have already done some work on this in your series, but we're interested in terms of form and artists who are exploring the unique value and the unique shake-up of form, but also in terms of content and representing lives on stage that are largely unrepresented. So that's the core reason why those organizations are part of this, to encounter a large number of really remarkable artists, to deepen our artistic research and knowledge. And I'm sure we'll hear about it, but Sindri is a great example of an artist who's deeply thinking about ways that audiences can experience dance, especially for those with visual impairment. But for us, it enhances the experience of all of our audiences. Or maybe we also are aware that a lot of the artists we're working with are coming to their work not through the usual formal training routes, which is a whole nother conversation about barriers in the cultural education sector. But not being trained in the same way often means bringing new reference points, often bringing socially engaged practice, for example, which feels urgent and intersectional. And artists bringing new audiences to our venues, so new entry points for artistic practice for audiences. But obviously, the other guiding principle of our work is that disabled artists are experiencing unique barriers throughout their careers. And again, that's subject to a whole nother discussion, but we can summarize and say that across the European cultural sector, there are barriers with venues, programs, professional development trainings, residencies, networking, all being largely inaccessible. And just to give you one little glimpse at this, and it is an extreme glimpse, but today as we speak, it's still illegal for a disabled artist to be enrolled in a publicly funded tertiary education in dance in Greece. So it's not just impossible, it's it's illegal. Crazy, I know. So I sometimes think that this name, Europe Beyond Access, is ironic. We called it that because we wanted to stop our organizations thinking about an access headache and more thinking about an artistic opportunity. But so much of our conversation has to be around access and how to provide accessible processes in the cultural sector. And in our own organizations, we have to admit, that have been constructed without thinking of people with disabilities. So it is a learning process. I'll give a very brief glimpse into our project design. I should say that this idea of learning between us is really important. I should say the way that we structured this project, to be honest, was partly led by a funding instrument, a fund that's out there by the Creative Europe program of the European Union, to whom we're really grateful. But they fund artistic collaborations, which are about learning from each other. So we do a lot of that. We do joint staff training, we do exchange, we have paid expert trainers come and talk to us, study visits on audience development, how accessible artistic practices, study visits to learn about artists and different strands of work. And we have an expert collaborators board. And I don't think you knew this when you invited us all, but Sindri and Diana both sit on our expert collaborators board, which is a paid role, a paid board who give us robust feedback. And I'll come on to that later on. But that feels important. That this is we are exchanging between us. We are exchanging when we get things right and when we get things wrong. At the heart of our work is commissioning and co-producing and presenting touring works by leading deaf and disabled artists. So we have 4 big co-productions, and Diana and Sindri, I know we're going to talk about those, that they happen to be supported. We landed on those through a Europe-wide open call of works led by disabled artists. And it's one of the main changes in focus as we've moved from our first edition to our second, is we're really interested in work that's led by disabled artists. Doesn't mean we don't value work which is led by non-disabled artists, and in certain parts of Europe that is the norm. But for us, this is a huge interest. If we really believe that disabled artists are challenging form and bringing new ideas and innovation, well, we want those artists to lead the processes and shake it up a bit more. But we'll also be commissioning another 20 works that will tour around Europe, and of course, presenting existing works that are already touring. We'll be supporting that with audience development. But also, I think really important is behind the scenes supporting the knowledge development and capacity building of artists through artistic labs where artists come together. And in our first edition, Caroline, you were wonderful enough to come and lead one of those laboratories around making work in public spaces. And I think you provocatively called it unexpected bodies in unexpected places. But a whole range of laboratories looking at different artistic themes or skills. Because disabled artists, firstly, are geographically isolated in Europe. You know, your peer may not be in the same town or even country. Your peer, as say, a learning disabled choreographer, might be in a country on the other side of Europe. So bringing artists together to work and exchange and to think about what it means in terms of leadership. And also to have residencies and digital masterclasses that support those artists to think. And then finally, and I will cut it short in a moment, this initial presentation, but thinking about our responsibility as organizations to transform the cultural sector. So doing that nationally, sharing the knowledge that we've learned, sharing the challenges and the joy that we have experienced, but also through also through research. And in the first edition, we published a major report called Time to Act. It's the first time that there was Europe-wide research around accessibility or lack of it in the cultural sector. And in December this year, we'll publish some hard-hitting research around the lack of access to cultural education. And by thinking about our responsibility to the grassroots arts and disability sector, so we've set up and now thrive the European Arts and Disability Cluster, which is information exchange and lobbying organization for disabled artists and cultural organizations in Europe. And we've just published a position paper aimed at the European Union, saying like how the European Union must and can act to reduce discrimination. So a whole range of activities. If it's helpful, maybe I can just touch upon some of the challenges that we've had. I don't know if this is a good time to do that.
I think that would be really helpful, Ben.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this and talking about the challenges for us. And actually, I think the best and maybe the most honest way to share the challenges is to share a couple of excerpts from the annual report that we ask our expert collaborators to give us. And these are a list of provocations and recommendations that they give us, having experienced the project in different ways, and to which we have to respond. So we've set up a sort of formal way of being challenged and responding. So I'm going to share a few of those challenges. So here, I'm going to share 3 of them. Number 1, so the provocation was, how can we as EBA project guarantee minimum accessibility standards across the project? And this was a phrase, and it was really difficult for us to hear. Some of us, expert collaborators, have experiences of EBA activities as artists or as audience members, which we felt to be inaccessible. We feel this is not acceptable within the EBA project. And we recommend that you, as EBA partners, establish and agree upon a minimum standard of accessibility. God, that was hard to hear. And it's true that we've partners in very different contexts, with a very different disability context, a very different finance context. We've got partners in Spain and Greece where this conversation is not very advanced, less history of work. But I thought it was a useful challenge. What's our responsibility as a network? And we've taken some responsibility, and we've introduced new systems, access passports, which are standard across the project, questionnaires, training. Some of our partners have introduced accessibility managers, clarifying where we as partners have the responsibility for accessibility, not delegating that to external curators, even if we want to give them autonomy. And clarifying when artists are moving between our organizations, when does access get handed over? So there's a dedicated conversation around that. So that was difficult learning. Second provocation, how can this project improve its relationship with deaf communities of artists and audiences? Really challenging for us working in multilingual conversations. And what we've had to do is create a dedicated deaf artist strategy, which is something we've been working on in the last 4 months. So we're in year 2, and the last 4 months we've been really working on this, changing our budget allocations. When you're working with people using different sign languages, sign language costs go up, but that's our responsibility, not a problem for those in the room. Think about new websites and sign language communications and making active curatorial decisions to address imbalance. There was a similar provocation about learning disabled artists, actually, about how we ensure accessibility. But the third provocation I'll just share, which is more in terms of the content, is how can we as a project go further to support the development of different national contexts and discourses and around arts and disability? And I think this was a reaction to this maybe a sort of easy feeling about, oh, some countries are further advanced in this topic than others. And of course, it's true that accessibility practices are maybe have a longer tradition and maybe we can say are more advanced than others. But when trying to learn from other countries around accessibility practices, we shouldn't be removing the fact that there are unique discourses that come from that sector. So what does a Polish arts and disability culture look like that's different to a German arts and disability discourse, which is different to UK or US, which can be dominant? And I speak coming from the UK, and I'm really aware that sometimes that UK US dominance can happen in the discourse, in the language we use. So I think that's a provocation we sit with and we need to do more on. Actually, I don't think we're there, but equity also includes geographical equity and how we make sure the voices of disabled artists are not reduced just because we're trying to import accessibility practices from other countries. But I can talk about that for hours, as you say, Caroline, and I won't now. That's the end of my introduction.
Thanks, Ben. It's so much, and I think thinking about Australia is a similar landmass size to the whole of Europe. So that thing about being remote and your peers being far away from you is an experience that we are very familiar with in this country. But finding those connections is super critical. And how can we generate those opportunities to work together? Before I throw you the next tricky question, Ben, I would love to hear. So you alluded to the fact that both Deanna and Sindri are two of the 4 artists that have been commissioned in this next round of commissions. And I wondered if I could invite Deanna to tell us about the work, about the commission. How's it going? What's its ambition? What are you focusing on? Where are you up to?
So just to say that I'm really honored to be one of the commissions, and it's like in the time that is coming, it's also I've been facing a severe injury since 1 year already, so it's also I've been living with pain, and it's also very kind of emotional to arrive to this stage that I'm commissioned and I have the support to do a thing with more structure and more consistency and more support. So it also makes me very kind of honored, and I feel also the responsibility of that. And I'm trying to do the best, since also in cultural terms in Portugal we are facing a very political complex changing, since we are now with a massive right-wing government at the moment, and we will be facing severe changes not only in disability terms but in cultural terms. So this piece that I'm commissioning is something that I started working already like 1 year and a half before now. So when I started thinking about it, I was not considering being in this state of government and in the world and with the social changes that are happening. So more than ever, it makes me a lot of sense to do it, since we are facing this extremely extremist and problematic discourse. So in this sense, this piece envision a lot of problematics that nowadays we are facing. So the piece is called Hornfuckers, and it's a very ironic title already. But when I started to think about it, I was not living what I'm living now. So it also kind of, it seems the universe is synchronizing something. So it's also a piece that a piece that I has a lot of responsibility and ambition. So I'm not in my comfortable zone, doing it. But I also believe that artists in risk, putting themselves in risk, is something that challenges the arts sector and also the social norms. So I think this is the way I work, at least. So in Hornfuckers, this piece, it's set in a post-apocalyptic landscape, and it explores loneliness, disobedience, and the instability of systems. So it's rooted in the chaos theory and physics, and the work investigates how a small movement provokes unpredictable shifts. It's also a piece that works the body as a state of rupture, as an extraordinary event in a collapsing world. With that, Hornfuckers is a suspended piece. and the bodies are suspended and they resist gravity and they refuse the normative order. So through this disorganization, it questions hierarchy, politics, and the logic of obedience. It's a work that we work about what we choose not to see until it demands to be seen. It also reflects this state of subservience of human identity, and it turns individual into a social condition. So reality emerges in the spectacle, but the spectacle emerges through reality. And it's in this game that we are, whether dominated or dominating, that we seek a state of rupture with the social structures, bringing us to a place of awareness and judgment for those very systems. It's also, more than ever, Hornfuckers, it works to aims to expose manipulation of masses and distaste of human capitalistic visions that we are living. And this vision that automatizes and forces to resist in a world that has always been cruel, but today it exists in a state of destruction that we are all observers. Since it's a piece that is for masses, and this is something that I usually don't work, I work in a more intimate state of performances. So I like this relation that audience is very near and they are kind of connected through these empathic states of experiencing the performances. This piece is very different because it's for large auditoriums that I also don't feel very comfortable, and I work about not very comfortable things. I work about conflicts. So it's also something that kind of scares me. And also, since it's a large-scale production, I'm also trying to do how can I put myself in a provocative state and understanding accessibility and how we work dramaturgical social problems or social questions or hierarchies and how we work with that. So for that reason, I put a very large team of people that will be kind of giving me feedbacks and in a very kind of open field of different teams. So with that, I put myself in collaboration with artists such as a trans artist from Lisbon that is called Batata, and it will also give me feedback about neutral language, but also in terms of gender. I don't know if the translation is right, but gender questions or gender issues or gender situations in the dramaturgy. And also I put the Chiara Bersani to work with me about crypt theory and crypt dramaturgy and how do I work in disability arts, the artistic piece. And also about understanding the sound and how I work sound to the deaf community. I put Diana Anselmo, an Italian artist that it's also expert collaborator from EVA. And I also put blind dancer performer from Portugal, Inês Gonçalves, to understand how do we work audio description or how do we work for a blind audience the piece. And then I put more dramaturgical support from Rui Catalão, Marícia Barreiro Neves, and Teresa Silva. So they are normative artists, but although they work a lot about politics and in terms of dramaturgy, and I feel this is a piece that I'll be hearing a lot of voices and try to understand how to do things better, because I feel, has been said, my work is also about learning from mistakes and trying to do better and trying to understand how we work with the disability community and how we work to the disability community and how we work to create awareness also to the normative community, since I feel this is a very fragile territory, because most of the time when I'm trying to sensibilize or educate people to understand the disability arts community, I feel they see me as a threat. So this is a very fragile territory to exist. And kind of imposing rights most of the time feels like you are taking rights from the other normative community. So this is a very complex territory that very often arrives to a violent place. And so it's also about negotiating this I give one step forward and going one back, and trying to, how do we work this sensibilization and also fighting for the rights. I feel it's much more complex than we think, because it exists in a state of conflict, and existing in this state when you are also very tired or in pain, it can be very tough. So I feel like together maybe it's more easy. So, and now I'm still expecting funds to the piece, and hopeful it will be done in this first very ambitious proposal. But I still don't know if it will be that. But yeah, I'm very happy and excited to work about this. And I already started to work in artistic residency in Germany. So it's a piece that will be premiere in March next year. So I still have a lot of time to work with.
Diana, that's amazing. Thank you. And it's just so multi-layered. Like, I think we talk about, part of the Radical Access program is about how we embedding access in the work that we create. And I think you're demonstrating that through your collaborative, like through your group of collaborators that are supporting and are being part of this group. But and so we could talk about access clashes within that as well, like how does all the access work, without even thinking about how are you then presenting these incredibly, as you described them, fragile, political and potentially violent kind of scenarios. And it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah. I also forgot I have an artistic team that works with me already for a few years. So I have my costume designer and my sound guy and riggings, because I also works about risk and safetiness and how we mix these. And I feel it's also, so it's a massive team, and let's hope it can be done like that. But I feel it's also putting myself in a challenge position.
Yeah.
And to understand. And also I have 8 performers to do that. So it's really something of managing. And for those that works in the art sector, they know big teams is something very complex sometimes to do. And I always feel, since I work with this body and mind limits, non-limits and risky situations, it can be very tough. So I also would like to be a nice experience for all the team. And this is always very hard to achieve. So I'm very excited to do this, and I'm very honored. And thank you, EBA, for being my partner.
Thanks for sharing all of that, Diana. It's just extraordinary. And we would love to find a way. I mean, it'd be amazing to bring it to Australia, but we can talk about that another day. Thank you. So Sindri, could you please tell us about your EBA commission, the work that you've been commissioned to make?
Yes.
Tell us a bit about it, how you're embedding access into the work, why is it important, and why now for you?
So I applied with a project that was called AD Orchestra, as in audio description orchestra. Now it has changed slightly and massively in the same time, I would say. to a project that is called Rehearsal Radio Outside Ear. So I would also ask you, if I feel stuck, you can please feel free to ask more questions or specify something. Yeah.
Of course.
But the main idea was something that I've been interested in for a long time in relation to a non-sighted performer or maker or living in a dance world that lacks information for someone like me and other visually impaired people, but also in relation to my interest in sound and music and yeah, like the auditory aspects of making things, let's say. So I was curious for years how I could use visual interpretation as an aesthetic or artistic medium in itself to see how we can go beyond the idea of visual interpretation or audio description as something that is only there to support someone in a later stage or work with in a post situation, let's say, and how it could be integrated and made into maybe not an art form itself, but used as a tool to aestheticize. Can you say that? Like to make more fun out of it and make more artistic integrity or dignity maybe into the world of description that can both be an interest of linguistics and as I said, the interest of sound and music, but also that it has roots in making it more accessible. So I've been playing a lot with different ways of describing and different ways of me interpreting visual interpretation because I'm not educated within that, but I'm using it in my ways and I've been trying it out in many ways where I have needed it the past 15 years. And also I've been interested in description as in listening. Every day I listen to my voiceover, my screen reader on my phone, and it's such an incredible tool to use and be inspired by. So I think for me it was somehow creating an ocean of words and how can I relate to them? How can I both produce them myself and how can I let them integrate with my anatomy and my way of being and listening somehow. So from this great idea that I called AD Orchestra, which was supposed to be more of a maybe a duet or with me and a musician on stage where we use my voice and also use external voices, the audience voices, live interpretation from local audio describers, for example, and collectively try to make somehow a sonosphere with words and description that can be something we all could how do you say sit and swim inside, and that was supposed to be I also call it kind of a solo for me, but anyway, that it was made to be a piece in its original aspect and maybe in a normative aspect, I would say, on a classical aspect of a 1 hour piece with an arc of a dramaturgy and me presenting myself, me like being political in a sort of representational political way somehow. And I think there was something I said before when I talked about myself and my art making that I have tried many of these things already, and I have done many of these things, and now I am curious how I can expand and still find passion within the activism and find something that I more believe in could make another or a different or a bigger progress to the access perspective in this. So something that I was curious about with the rehearsal radio outside ear was more to work with the method or the methodology, because I find somehow that I've been making works for 10 years, and every time I get asked, like, what kind of method do you do, or how do you apply accessibility or your needs within disability perspectives in your work, I always felt this fear and stress of how to answer that, because I felt like I'm just trying to survive, and I do get some money to make my work, but there's still not enough money. There's not enough time, but also not enough belief in myself that I could take or be with my own time that I need to figure out what is actually accessibility for me, or what is methodology for me, and how can I make something that brings me hope, that is important for me to put out there in the world somehow. So this project of the rehearsal radio is basically to do recordings of rehearsals, to be an outside ear instead of an outside eye. So I love in my making to play with like new term making or new word, like come up with new words and terms, because also in I feel even in the sonic world, or in the I mean, I'm not a music maker, but I've been working with music and writing songs and collaborating with a lot of musicians and composers. I still feel that there's a lot of the terminology we use that are still coming from an ocular centric perspective, for example. So that I'm curious about how we can dive into a rehearsal situation or a making situation or even a class or a workshop. That will be specified, but to be there as an outside ear, partially because I'm curious about how is it to listen to some things, or if we put an ear in a room, what do we actually notice that we maybe need additionally, that we can't pick up if it's an ear there, or how can we also expand the way of listening. So I think it works both ways. Like I want to both work with how we can record things, but also how we look at listening, for example, and how can we listen to dance, for example. And also, I think I had a little passion for rehearsal situations, as it's a place that can be hopefully a wider space, a more vivid and free space where we don't have to conform or press everything into the form and the shape of a project that is ending up as a product, a show, a piece where I'm going to represent myself in a world that is 99% full of people with able bodies and not understanding my aesthetics or my needs, for example. So I think I was curious to re-ask the EBA team, with super good support and encouragement, to rethink this idea. It was very challenging, because obviously the EBA is supporting co-productions or making work or possibilities for us to make work. But I kind of insisted and said that I believe more in this. And I want to challenge how we work. I want to challenge my methods and take time for making first, and then investigate, or then evaluate what that making was and what it could be. Because I feel like it's very easy for us artists, I was going to say especially disabled artists, because maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like we have to prove ourselves and have statements and be so clear. And this is what I want. I have this unique selling point, and I know who I am. I know what I do. Because if I don't know, you're out of the game, you know? So I think I wanted with this project to actually emphasize the unknowing and emphasize being in something that I don't know. So, for example, as a method, I want to use from August this year or September to use a whole year of like doing and doing and doing, and then see what that is, and then see where that could lead within the parameters of listening to dance, recording rehearsals, and how I can potentially put that on stage later. Partially as an immersive space, an immersive room where you can go in and walk around, roll around, sit around in this ocean of words that I mentioned. And also as a way to document and making an archive of recordings, archive of movement and language and choreography, let's say. So I think what I'm curious about in this is how the process and how the experiment is a part of the actual art in this, and is an actual part of the production and the thing that we will put on stage later. And I don't know exactly how that would be, but I know that deep inside of me, I get so happy and so thrilled when I can hear recordings and hear how that is accessible for me. So I think I want to reach out for an audience that are both visually impaired, and I will use a lot of peers within the field that have a lot of collective and political knowledge that I will ask for advice, but also invite people with no eyesight or very little eyesight to ask, how does it work for you? What would you like more? What do you need? And also, I would like to make this a part of, like, for example, I'm going to collaborate with a venue in Stockholm, the Modern Dance Theater, MDT, and I'm going to collaborate with the Stockholm University of the Arts, with the MA students in choreography, to come and record them and talk about how we listen to dance, for example. And through those methods, I want to shape and form what I later want to make into a sonic archive, and something that I can travel with and perform and set up, and just like open a little space within a space, for example, visiting other festivals or rehearsal situations, but also learning more about how I explain my own work and work with sound and words.
Amazing.
Talking
Thank
and
you,
talking.
that's
Talking.
incredible.
Yeah.
I just as a thought, and it's probably too early in the process, but because this is about embedding access, I'm really interested in, I'll be interested in following how, because your description of it is so beautiful and articulate about this ocean of words, and I'll be interested to see how that might evolve to become accessible to a deaf audience, for example, who aren't necessarily that outside ear and aren't hearing all of those beautiful recordings, but how might they access this? And I suppose it's just a reflection or a thought about that. I'll be interested to see how that might happen.
As a way to make this accessible for a deaf audience is that we're going to transcribe everything into text that could be read, but also that it could be made with sign language.
Yeah.
I think that's also interesting in the way of how do you read or listen to this, because if it's transcribed or retold by someone else, both in words or in sign language, it becomes more a phenomena that we're looking at rather than the actual previous situation.
And maybe
Caroline,
sorry, you go, Ben.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, and Caroline, we at EBA obviously complicate matters further by going, well, how does a Greek audience encounter these words, and how does a French audience, so it's so great that Sindri's thinking about this right from the start, because I mean the subtext of all of this is retrofitting any of this is impossible and imperfect, but if we're thinking about it from the start, whether it be embedding access or embedding language translation, it takes some deep thought, but it ends up in much more beautiful results. So we're really grateful to Sindri for thinking about that as well, just to add into your joy.
Thank you. Ben, can you just say a little bit about the commissions and how they happen, and just what sort of, I'm really interested to know what sort of money is involved in a commission like this.
It's hard to say, to give you a exact number, because each of the artists, Diana's work is being supported by a number of our partners, but one in particular, Cultagest in Lisbon, who are providing a lot of its own resources as well. And Diana's show is let's just say it's an expensive one to tour. So, but actually, I think it's not just about the size of the money. So even if we're talking about 20 or 30,000 euros, I mean, Culture Gest are putting in more. We also think it's about coming in early, right up front and saying, you've got this money, but let's also introduce you. And I know Culture Gest have done an amazing job of, and Deanna's own producer, to say, like, let's find other European co-producers so that that money hits, into the upper tens or higher. Um,
Amazing.
and yeah, so so it is about the money, but I have to say that it would be wrong to give the impression that our money by any means can cover all of the costs of any of the shows. It's
Yeah.
absolutely not that. But
Yeah.
the idea is saying, let's come in early, let's guarantee it. And because we're a 4-year program, let's make this decision in year 1. And even if you're saying your production comes in year 4, you can go to your national funder and say, hey, I've got 25,000 euros in the pot.
Mm.
I've got a commitment. I've got 4
Yeah.
touring things in Europe by leading organizations
Mm.
and other money support. So I think certainly that's how it works. Thinking about the structure of commissioning in Europe is like someone's got to buy in first. And I think the problem
Mm.
is for disabled artists is that people come in once the show's maybe often been made the first time and they feel, it's safe now. I can book that artist. Well, someone's got to take a risk. So, I mean, risk I'm using in inverted commas, but someone's got to make an early commitment. So it's
Yeah.
also, to others think about this, it doesn't have to be hundreds of thousands, but it's also about, okay, it's upfront, it's confirmed. And if Sindri wants to change their mind on what they want to do, we will find a way to continue to support it.
Yeah.
Because
Amazing.
things like that are challenging.
Great. This is the beginning of a conversation. It is not the end. And we could talk about this for a very, very long time. I just wanted to extend my huge gratitude and thanks to Ben, to Deanna, and to Sindri for sharing your wisdom, your insights, your artistry, your creativity with us, with me in this space. I think we have so much to learn in this country. But as you say, Ben, we're all learning in this space all the time. There is no right or wrong way to do it. But it's about trying. I think that's the most important thing is to try, rather than to avoid. And I think that's a really super crucial place. I wish you, Deanna and Sindri, the biggest, luck is not the word, but the greatest joy in the making of the work. I send you huge love and thanks, and I hope that we get to experience the work here in Australia at some point. But thank you all, and Ben, thank you for being so crucial actually for so long in this space and supporting so many of us. I'll include myself in that, but so many disabled artists. You have changed the lives of so many, and it wouldn't have happened without your complete determination. So I extend my huge gratitude to you as well. Thank you to our lovely audience. We will be putting up another conversation next week, so come back and join us then. But again, thank you all for being here, and thank my brilliant speakers. See you later.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
Credits text. Hosted by Cultural Equity Consultant at Melbourne Fringe, Caroline Bowditch. Panellists: Ben Evans, Project Director of Europe Beyond Access. Deanna Niepce, Choreographer, Dancer, Author. Sindri Runudde, Performance Maker, Choreographer and Dancer. Program Manager for Access at Melbourne Fringe, Millie Cooper. Edited by Rachel Edward. Audio and captioning by Alex Edward. Auslan interpreting by Rebecca Cramp, Paul Houston. Audio description by Rachel Edward. Presented by Melbourne Fringe. This project has been Fringe funded as part of Radical Access, supported by the Australian Government through Creative Australia, its principal arts investment and advisory body.